KSC presence. This mom decided to adopt a baby girl. Then she discovered the child was related to her son. For some people, parenthood can be the most rewarding experience of their life. Katie Page can certainly attest to that, as she adopted her young son Grayson in May 2017. However, the single mom then made an incredible discovery after meeting a baby girl the following month. Born in Birmingham, Alabama, Page moved to Colorado some 10 years ago and currently resides in Denver. In November 2014 she got a job at GE Johnson, a construction company based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Taking on the role of Integrated Services Manager, her position involves overseeing a range of different building projects. However, 2014 proved to be a difficult year for Page, as she got divorced during that period. Following the split, the Denver resident did plenty of soul-searching, trying to get her life back on track. To do that, though, she realized that she needed to make some significant alterations. "I knew that God was calling me to be a woman quite different than who I was at the time," Page wrote in a blog post on her website Wood+Grace in November 2018. "I remember literally looking in the mirror one day and sobbing at the woman I saw. I knew I was not the woman my heart desired to be. I committed to changing my life and making a life that was fulfilling and one I was proud of," Page added. With that in mind, she went on to get her job at GE Johnson later that year, while also taking on an ambitious personal project. Indeed, the divorcee purchased a new house, which she described as a fixer-upper. "The house I bought would require extensive work to transform into my vision, and most of which I would have to do myself in order to afford it," Page wrote. The house was a large 4-bedroom home. "I told my friends at the time that was meant for more, even though I really didn't know what more meant at the time." While Page was slowly piecing her life back together, she also harbored an ambition that had been with her since childhood. When she was a young girl, the Alabama native dreamed of having kids of her own, but those hopes were dashed several years later. Unfortunately, she suffered with fertility problems throughout the course of her previous marriage. However, Page's childhood dream was reignited about a fortnight after moving into her new house. That was when she was sent an intriguing message from her church. While reading through the email, the construction manager was drawn towards an advert for an informal meeting about foster care. "I did not know anyone who fostered children or was raised in a foster home," Page wrote on Wood+Grace. "I really knew nothing about it, but my heart called to learn more. When I proceeded to ask my mother, who was helping me with the renovations, 'Would you go with me to this informational session about foster care?' she said, 'What?' Given the hard work that Page was putting in to renovate the house, her mom offered some words of caution about becoming a foster parent. But despite that initial reluctance, she eventually relented and accompanied her daughter to the meeting. While there, the pair then received some eye-opening information. What I heard that evening about foster care gave me chills and scared me, but it also pulled at my heart in a way I couldn't stop thinking about it," Page wrote in her blog. "I continued to pray and work through the idea of taking on children of trauma as a single full-time working woman." With that in mind, Page then made a decision that changed her life forever. After lots of contemplation, on Mother's Day of 2015 I completed my application and took the next step to becoming a foster mom and beginning a new adventure, she wrote. And around 1 year later, she was fully immersed in her new role. Indeed, Page was looking after her 4th foster kid at that point, but her mindset was slowly changing. While spending time with the young boy, she mulled over an idea that would significantly alter her long-range plans. After thinking things over, the foster mom spoke about her newfound ambition with her caseworker. "I wanted a longer-term placement and potentially one to stay forever," Page wrote. "Up until then, I had really only focused on temporary placements, but was cautiously open to fostering to adopt if the option presented itself. At my caseworker's next home visit, I revealed my desire to be a child's forever home." Shortly following that discussion, Paige received an important message. "I had a voicemail on my phone in the middle of the workday from my caseworker," she recalled on her blog. It was about a baby boy who had been abandoned at the hospital, and it was likely to be a foster to adopt situation. Paige sensed a real opportunity to realize her dream, with the baby having made it through a tricky period. He had drug exposure, but was not showing signs of withdrawal and would be ready to discharge the next day, she wrote. "I immediately called her back and said, 'I want him. Give me 5 minutes and please don't call anyone else.'" After Paige spoke it over with her mother, she arrived at the hospital the following day, ready to pick up the newborn baby. From there, the foster mom brought him back to her house, but she had one more big job. The youngster still didn't have a name at that point, with the nurses simply dubbing him Baby Boy. To make things a little easier, though, Paige had already compiled a lengthy list of potential names in the past, which she quickly referred back to. And as she looked through the choices, one name in particular stood out. So with that in mind, she named the baby boy Grayson. With Grayson settling in, Paige invited her mother to stay at the house over the following months. She was, after all, still looking after the other foster child. "I had no idea how I would be able to take care of a 14-month-old and a newborn all by myself, so I knew I needed help," the construction manager admitted. However, while Paige's mom was prepared to assist her daughter, the next few months proved quite challenging. During that period, Paige began to search for Grayson's biological parents, but that particular endeavor proved somewhat tricky. "The information left at the hospital never led to anyone," she wrote in her blog. "No one answered the ads posted in the newspaper or came back to the hospital in search of the boy that had been left that day," Paige continued. At that point, the foster mom started to feel some contrasting emotions about the search, leaving her in a tough position. "Part of me was relieved that no one came forward, so that Grayson would be mine forever with no opposition," Paige wrote. "But there was always a pit in my stomach about one day having to tell my son that no one showed up at his termination hearing. No one came looking. While my little man had been prayed for and longed for by me since I was a child, I still knew that discussion would be one I would dread for years," Paige added. Despite those anxious feelings, though, the big day ultimately arrived in May 2017. At this time, Grayson was closing in on his first birthday. After 11 months together, Paige finally adopted Grayson, in the process kickstarting the next stage in both their lives. And she decided to hold off bringing in any more foster children at that point. Due to the exposure to drugs in his mother's womb, the youngster faced some physical and mental challenges. Wanting to focus on her son's development, Paige planned to give it a few more months before opening her door to another child, turning down various offers in the process. However, her stance quickly changed following a conversation with her caseworker. Yet again, the mom was presented with an intriguing suggestion. After asking me how we were doing post-adoption, she began to tell me about an emergency placement they had for a 4-day-old baby girl with drug exposure that was at the same hospital as Grayson had been born at, Paige wrote on Wood Plus Grace. And she was needing placement that afternoon. "I could feel the fear inside me and the chills in my body. I was overwhelmed at the thought," Paige continued. "Yet the feeling also told me to keep listening and to consider this placement. Something was different about this one." Later that day, the foster mom welcomed the baby girl, who was named Hannah, into her house. Paige then uncovered an incredible coincidence when reviewing Hannah's medical records. The newborn had faced the exact same level of drug exposure as Grayson did from the previous year, with the pair displaying matching conditions. The similarities didn't end there, though, as she noticed something else later that evening. "As I reviewed the bracelets on the baby girl, I saw the first name of her mother match the name Grayson's mother had given to the hospital," Paige wrote in her blog. "I continued to review the discharge papers from the hospital, and when I came across the date of birth for her mother, I had to take a second look. It looked familiar." At that point in time, Paige had enlisted the assistance of a woman named Ashley Chapa, who was living at the house to help with the 2 children. After noting the recognizable birth date, the construction manager pulled out Grayson's details, sharing the information with Chapa. Before long, they both made a potentially unbelievable connection. Paige quickly realized that the birth date of Hannah's mom was just a day away from Grayson's, which led to a remarkable moment. "My roommate and I were looking at each other wondering if we were thinking the same thing," she wrote. Could they have the same mother? Much like Paige, Chapa was left in disbelief at the possibility that Grayson and Hannah were related. It was as surreal as you could imagine, the roommate told Good Morning America in January 2019. "Katie got her binder out from her paperwork with Grayson and we realized, same first name, everything." From there, Paige conducted a bit more research before getting in contact with Grayson's caseworker to discuss her findings. After that, she then received some information about Hannah's mother, which only strengthened her suspicions. And by the end of that week, Paige and the baby girl were set to meet her. Following their meeting, Paige was fairly convinced of her theory, which she relayed back to the caseworker. A few days later, this caseworker was scheduled to meet Hannah's mom for the first time as well, giving her a chance to put the pieces together. Later that day, Paige received a phone call. The caseworker called me shortly after the meeting and said, "Katie, I think you're right." Paige wrote on Wood Plus Grace. "Her story literally breaks my heart and I can't believe it, but I am 90% sure that you are right and this is a miracle." The conversation didn't end there, though. About 45 minutes later, the caseworker called me back and said, "Katie, now I am 100% sure," Paige added in her blog post. "We just found the last name she gave with Grayson's birth for a relative of Hannah." I cried as I hung up the phone. From there, Grayson and Hannah underwent a DNA test. And the results of this test revealed that the pair were indeed brother and sister, which led Paige to pursue another adoption. American Samoa, 2018 came to a close. She finally got her wish, officially uniting the siblings into the same adoptive family at the end of December. Hannah is the opposite of Grayson, Paige told Good Morning America in January 2019. "He loves to chill and she's a wild thing. As soon as I started figuring it out that she was his sibling, I said, absolutely, I'll adopt her. Once I took in Grayson and I accepted being his mom, I accepted his family." However, there was one more twist still to come in this remarkable tale, as Paige was told about yet another baby sibling. Indeed, Paige ended up taking in Hannah and Grayson's little brother ahead of Hannah's adoption. And now, Paige is hopeful of making him an official member of the family in 2019. "I was a single woman in a 4-bedroom house and now every room in my house is full," Paige reflected. "It's never dull. People ask me all the time, how do you do it? I never thought I'd have 3 babies, but God doesn't give you more than you can handle."